I'll first tell you what I do for a living, as it will bring some understanding to my situation. I run my own business, if you could call it that. I've thought of it more as a personal service. I break into the home or building of a client's choice, destroy or steal whatever they want, provide proof of the action, and then I get paid. Quite substantially, if I may add. My clients usually take the form of a middle-class man angered at their boss, or a recently dumped individual who wants revenge on their ex. Essentially, I do the work that one has the anger and desire to do, but doesn't have the actual nerve to do it themselves. I know it's not the most honorable profession, but hey, I'm good at it. It paid well, and it gave me some interesting places to explore, so I've been quite content with my job. About a few weeks ago, I received a usual call for what I expected to be a usual job. The caller requested me to break into an abandoned house, not too far from my area. He requested me to retrieve a few recordings of sorts. VHS tapes, cassettes, DVDs, they didn't matter. All he really cared about was anything that looked interesting, as he described. Despite the fact that the information is important to my work, he didn't tell me anything that would be useful for the search. He wouldn't even tell me anything about himself, which almost made me turn down the job until he offered me an unusually large payment. When the caller had mentioned abandoned house, I had expected the location to be a shed away from the local population, and generally safe to break into during the day. To my frustrated surprise, the place was in the middle of the damn street, right along a string of other apartments surrounding the building, most of which were populated. People on the sidewalk strolled past it, not acknowledging its existence, sometimes even being taken back by its derelict state. I came back after dark, and it was just how I wanted it to be. No pedestrians anywhere, and there were no lights on in the surrounding structures, so it appeared to be an easy target. The house stood 2 stories, with a small attic at its highest point. It didn't look like the most enjoyable place to live, even before it had aged. The best word I can think to describe its living quality would be confined. It appeared to only have a single window, which was on the attic level. The front door, what I believed to be the only entrance, had an unnecessary amount of locks on it, all of which were now rusted away. It opened with a mere tap of my foot. I should probably state here that, though I don't have nyctophobia or anything of the sort, I enjoy completely dark, abandoned buildings as much as the next wandering guy. By my first step into the house, I wanted the job done fast. What I'm saying is that I was not paying attention to specific details at the time, of both the home and what may have been there. When I had turned on my flashlight, the first room appeared entirely vacant of anything, as if it had been completely cleared after the departure of its residents. This was both good and bad in my situation. This meant that the room was free of obstacles, but also meant that I would need to search more of the house, which I wasn't too excited to. There were other homes around, but I would be fine if I at least kept the noise to a decent level. The place hardly had any windows after all. I had gone up the stairs to find a similar area, an empty room with nothing that I was looking for. This meant further worse news. I would have to check the attic. Though I said I wasn't severely frightened by the dark, I would be lying if I said I didn't have a discomfort with tight spaces. The attic was accessed by a standard pull-down stairway on the ceiling of the second-story room. It took a couple of jerks to budge, but it came down without much resistance. A large cloud of dust covered my view for a few seconds, which made me realize how old the place really was. Each step of the stairway creaked tremendously, to where it became more irritating than unnerving. The last step brought me inside the attic, which showed the only window in the house. A bit of moonlight shined down into the small room, which helped ease my tension by a near insignificant amount. Scanning the room, I had finally caught eye of a few boxes in the corner. 3 aged cardboard boxes, all packed with a number of old VHS tapes. No DVDs, though the place was so old that I really didn't expect to find any. I was still in a rush to get out there, so I didn't take much time looking through them. I didn't even pick out a few, I just grabbed the heaviest box and dragged it to the ladder. I didn't realize exactly how much was in the box until I had dropped it on the floor, which made a rather loud crash that seemed too loud for its size. Some of the tapes were probably broken in this process, but I didn't stop to check. I just wanted to be out of there. When I reached the bottom of the ladder, I didn't bother putting it back up. But this is where I saw something strange. When picking the box back up, I saw a small red light in the corner of the room. Like a sort of dot. It wasn't moving, but I still stormed to the stairs. I was growing paranoid, so I didn't care to investigate what it was. I arrived at the top of the stairs, and I observed something else. That the house had another level, which I assumed to be a basement. There was another stairway leading downwards, that could only be seen if one was actually looking down the stairs at the second level. At the bottom of this stairway was another faint, but noticeable red dot. I was carrying the heavy box of tapes, so I didn't have a hand to shine my flashlight on it. And then I tripped. There's no other way of saying it. I tripped and stumbled down the entire stairway, all the way down to the first floor. I should have broken a leg or my back in the process, but the box of tapes actually managed to break my fall in some sort of miraculous way. The VHS tapes were all scattered across the bottom of the stairs, and I didn't want to take the time to retrieve them all. I picked up 3 tapes that were closest to me. My body hurt like hell, but I was more focused on the fact that I had just made noise similar to a damn police raid. I rushed back to my car and drove home, without issue. I woke up the next morning with aches all over, but I hadn't gotten caught, which was all I cared about. I called my client numerous times, and just as I had almost predicted, he never answered. The number he gave me didn't even have an answering machine, as if it had been disconnected. I was quite sure that this client was going to be a no-show, which made me grow quite frustrated. Most of the time, I'm able to steal other items during a raid, so a client not giving payment was never a typical issue. However, there was hardly anything to even look at, let alone steal, in that abandoned house, so I was left empty-handed after a night of frightful work I had gone through. All I was left with was the tapes, which I decided to look at, just in case the client actually came back asking what I obtained. I was surprised to find that I even still had a VHS player in my closet. Because the tapes had no form of labels on them, I just played the first one in the stack of 3. The first tape I played was just static for a few minutes. I was about to stop it when it actually did cut to a picture. There was a date on the lower left corner of the screen, which was August 2nd, 2010. It was footage of a small room, which was vacant of any furniture, and looked to be in degrading condition. The video appeared to be in night vision, so the room must have been dark. It was lifeless footage until a door close to the camera opened. A young woman walked through, and the door shut behind her as she walked in. She started yelling, "Michael! Michael, it's me! Where are you?" She turned around in circles, searching for someone. There was a frantic, worried look of expression on her face. I assumed that this Michael would be her son, or another close person she was looking for. She waved her arms around in the dark before taking her phone out as a source of light. She walked to the end of the room and took a left at what appeared to be a stairway. The footage went to static a few seconds later. Now, I had an idea of where this footage may have been taken, but I refused to believe it at the moment of watching the tape. I didn't want to watch another just for that reason, but for my own safety, I had to know if my paranoia was correct. The next tape started similar to the last, static for a few minutes. Then it cut to the footage. It was of another empty room, which appeared to be in the same decaying state as the last. The footage also had a date and time, but it was March 14th, 2013. More than a year's difference. Someone came in from the small hallway leading into the room. This time, it was an older man. He actually had a flashlight this time, and he looked to the ceiling. He pulled down the staircase that led to the attic. I was beginning to panic. Those red lights, those dots in the corners of the rooms, they were cameras, and they were rolling. The abandoned house was rigged with them, more than I probably even saw. At first, I believed it must have been some sort of a police setup, which I immediately checked all my windows to see if my house was surrounded. Thankfully, I found nothing. I went back to the tape, and the recording showed the man climbing up the ladder into the attic. He too looked as if he was looking for something or someone, but he never actually spoke. He also never shined his flashlight around the room, so I doubt he even noticed the cameras. A few seconds after he was in the attic, the footage ended, but I did notice something. Moments before the tape ended, the camera moved, as if it was just picked up. I immediately went to the third and final tape, as I wanted to know what else may have been looking at me in that house. The tape was filming the stairway. It appeared zoomed in, like it was down another level, but focusing on the first to second floor. At the top of the stairs was the same man from the previous tape, which had the same date of March 14th, 2013. Since I had dropped the tapes down the stairs and when I collected them, I must have been lucky to grab 2 continuing tapes. The man in the footage appeared injured this time. He clutched his left arm, which revealed to have blood running down it. He stumbled with each step as he progressed down to the first floor. When he was just about at the bottom of the steps, he fell, probably out of exhaustion. But at the top of the stairway stood something. It looked to be a person, about 6 feet tall or so. It walked down the steps to the man, and then began to drag him by his uninjured arm. The man tried to put up a struggle, which led him to being kicked in the head multiple times. It moved the man down to the second staircase, the one I believe led to a form of basement. The figure was close enough to the camera where I could see its face, or at least what was covering it. It was wearing a mask, which looked to be like an aged rag, with holes cut for each eye and numerous tears everywhere. The skin exposed by the tears was a dark, bloodied gray, which led to me being more content that its face was covered. The thing stared at the camera for a moment, with blurred, yellow eyes that made myself even more uncomfortable. It then picked up the camera, and then turned it around to reveal a door at the bottom of the staircase. The creature picked up the man, opened the door, and kicked the man inside of another room which appeared to be empty. The door was quickly shut once the man went in, and then the camera just viewed the door for a few minutes. What was really disturbing here, however, was the sounds. Behind the door, there were many rapid scratching noises, as if the walls were being scraped. The injured man inside the room began to scream, and so did other voices. The other screams sounded inhuman, more animalistic than that of people. The injured man's screams were quickly cut off after what sounded like the ripping of flesh and the snapping of bone. I thought at first that the man stopped screaming, but then I realized that all the sound had been cut off from the footage. The door to the room opened, and inside the room were other creatures. They almost appeared human, but appeared very frail and gray, with no hair on their heads or anywhere on their body. Their spines were painfully visible and protruded from their bodies in an unnatural and excessive manner. The ones near the end of the room began to climb up the walls and onto the ceiling. One of them began to turn around, but the footage ended and cut to static before its face could be revealed. Naturally, I was terrified by this. I had just been inside that place, and I had been recorded in the same way. I checked all my windows again and locked them. I stayed indoors for a few days, keeping constant watch of if I was, being watched. I had burned the tapes, and when I was sure that I hadn't left any sort of trail from my visit to that house, I started to go out again. I occasionally took another job, but none that involved abandoned houses or structures. Not much more than 2 weeks ago, I received a package on my front door. I assumed this to be a payment from a recent client, as most would pay me by simply dropping off their part. I opened it to find 3 VHS tapes, which appeared to be in pretty new condition. They were each marked with a number going from 1 to 3. I played the first tape. It was footage of the same abandoned house as before, and it was the camera in the first empty room. A few minutes passed, and then somebody entered. It was a younger man who wore dark clothing as if he wanted to keep hidden. It only took a second to realize that this man was me, and that the tapes were of when I entered the house. I went straight to tape number 2. The second tape was a recording of the staircase, with the camera planted near the door to the basement. It showed me stumbling out of the hallway to the stairs, with a box of tapes in both hands. I took a few steps down, and then I watched myself painfully trip and fall. Except, I didn't actually trip. I was pushed. A figure at the top of the stairs, wearing the same rag on its head as in the previous tapes, had slightly shoved me. It wasn't enough force to where I could have felt him behind me, but enough to where I lost my balance with the box in my hands. The tape showed me jump back up to my feet, with 3 tapes in my hand, and run off screen, which was when I ran out of the house. The masked being only ran to the bottom of the staircase, and watched me run. It then walked slowly to the second flight of stairs, and looked into the camera for a few seconds, and then the footage ended. I was now more terrified than when I had watched the previous tapes, and my paranoia of being followed became more severe. It took every fiber of courage in my body to keep watching, and I played the final 3rd tape. This tape wasn't from inside the abandoned house. It was being held by someone, and it was taken from outside at a different location. The camera holder walked on a road for a few minutes, until focusing the camera on a single house. The house was mine, and whoever or whatever was filming let out a loud, sickening laugh, and the tape ended. I've grown more and more paranoid, and with good reason. I'm not huddled into the center of a room all day, but I don't go out into public much either. Anytime I do, I feel like I see a masked figure out of the corner of my eye. Perhaps it's just a fabrication of my mind, but I even sense it right next to me in some places. There will be a few days where I'll hear a knock at the door, only to find a single tape on my doorstep. Each is very similar to the last. It's always footage of my own house, usually during the day, but other times at night. And with each and every tape, the camera gets closer and closer.